Good morning and welcome to this final class of our Lenten series, Exploring Images of the Invisible God. We've been moving through history, looking at how Jesus has been represented, and we are very much to the 20th century and the 21st. I think maybe one.
Yeah, at least one.
Yes, the Swanee. So today we're up to speed. Now, there's some provocation in the art that we're going to look at today, because a lot of what contemporary artists have done, as we'll see here in just a moment, is take the tradition and reconstruct it, deconstruct it and reconstruct it, or take the tradition and push back on it. And ways that for some can be problematic, as we'll look at with one piece of art in particular. But I ask you to come along on the journey today, and if you feel yourself not liking it at the very least, or being unsettled by it, maybe a gentle way to put it, I hope that you'll just wonder, what is it about the art that's unsettling? I don't want to oversay this because the art is great, but why don't we pray together?
O God,
who before the passion of your only begotten Son revealed his glory upon the holy mountain, grant to us that we, beholding by faith
the light of his
countenance, may be strengthened to bear our cross and changed from his likeness from glory to glory. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
All right, today the three of us are in dialogue, but we're also in dialogue with you. So we may lead the conversation, but we will want you, in the same way that you have been wonderfully participating all along, please raise your hand, offer your contributions and your thoughtful responses too. Modern art. There's lots of different ways that artists have been paradigms, philosophies, genres, you might say, of Christian art of Jesus in the contemporary world. And today we've put them into a few categories just to try to organize the conversation today a little bit at first. We're going to be looking at art that is all, well, I'm looking around the room. I think it's all made in our lifetimes, okay? Pretty much. And so modern art, and the first category we're going to look at today is re-envisioning tradition. And by that, we mean art that you can immediately look at and know the tradition that it is trying to play with or reimagine. It's not hard to see where they're coming from, but they're doing it in thoughtful or creative new ways. And so I want to tee up this first couple of images or artists by looking at the tradition out of which they come, the tradition that they are conversing with in their creativity, okay? So two of the most famous traditional Byzantine-style icons that exist in the world. We have the Virgin of Vladimir. Other than the three visitors to Abraham and Sarah, by far the most famous icon in Russia, and it predates Rublev by several centuries. So actually, in many ways, this is just as or more important than the Trinity icon to Russian society, culture, and religion. Then on the right, we have Christ Pantocrator, lives at St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai, one of the most ancient representations of Christ in the world, and certainly in iconography. So traditional classical Byzantine style icons. These are by contemporary artists, by two artists. On the left is one named Robert Lentz, still living. Mary Magdalene, pointing to the resurrection.
I knew the artist. He did this for the Grace Cathedral.
Wonderful.
And there, if you go to a Greek Easter lunch, you will get red Easter eggs.
Yes.
Because she was brought before Caesar, who challenged her to prove Christ was risen. And she picked up an egg on the table and held it up, and it turned red.
So we have Robert Lentz is a Franciscan priest and iconographer who is in dialogue with the tradition, but is taking the saints and the life of Christ and thinking how might rather, so traditionally iconographers just replicate. The point is to replicate. The point is not to deviate. It is to replicate. And obviously what Lentz is doing is breaking that tradition by imagining Mary Magdalene very differently. And I love that so often because of a deviant tradition of interpretation around Mary Magdalene, so often she's associated either with the Mary who anoints Jesus' feet, as we hear today in the story, or a prostitute. Mary Magdalene, that's a conflation of stories in the scriptures. Mary Magdalene should be remembered for her Easter Day experience, that she's the evangelist to the evangelist. She's the first witness of the resurrection. And here we have her depicted. What do you notice about her? She's young. She's something about her hands. What is that? The length of her fingers.
She's Middle Eastern, not European.
She's Middle Eastern.
She's in a hijab.
She's veiled, as a woman in that age would be. I hesitate to say she's in hijab because she's not Muslim. Islam didn't exist for another 6 centuries. But she is veiled as a woman in a traditional society would have been. What else do you notice? Well, yes, she has a halo.
I noticed she doesn't look particularly placid or sad like the Virgin in the Bible. She looks like she's, and I'm projecting from what I know of Scripture, she suffered, and she doesn't suffer fools gladly. She is very young, but I was very offended at first since you offered
Sure.
the opportunity by the Easter egg, by the egg itself. I didn't know the story of Caesar and
Yeah.
tradition, but as the longer I looked at it.
What can you say more about what was the offense?
Easter's not about bunnies, It's not like this
Yeah.
syncretism, this Hallmark, this
Yeah.
late-stage capitalism makes me want to vomit sometimes.
So you thought that was a kind of nod to contemporary Easter.
I was like, oh, how dare you be playful? Okay, you can be playful. But the longer I look at it, that's the luminescent center of that picture.
Yeah.
And it's a menorah. It's what Christ is standing in, I suppose. on
Sure.
Paul's altar.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
The shape.
I had never thought of an egg as a menorah, but it is.
We took it down, but do you remember the Moses before the burning bush that was hanging in here when this was our church? So youth, we hang it in the youth space. And in the burning bush is, do you remember what's in the burning bush in our icon?
Mary.
I'm sorry? Yes, it's Mary and Jesus. So within it is a sub-icon, an icon within an icon, pointing to. Moses is referencing something, and here the egg is, she's pointing to it. But rather than depict, the Jesus exiting the tomb or something, it's this subtle imagery that actually is aligned with the tradition around her life. What do y'all think?
I noticed that the artist has chosen to, what I assume, I don't speak that language that's on the bottom, but it doesn't remind me of Hebrew, and it doesn't really look like Arabic, and so I'm going to guess that that's Aramaic, which would have been the language that she spoke.
I think it's both.
I think that it's placing her in that culture, and that's how she would have referred to herself, and how she would see her name written if she could read. So I think that that's a strong choice too, to not use Greek or something like that, the traditional iconography.
It does look like there are 2 languages.
I think on the right is Arabic, and on the left is Aramaic.
That's correct.
That's cool.
It's
The
very
lang-
small
the-
on my screen.
Yeah,
That's why.
the language of place now, and the language of the people then, the language she would have been speaking. Yeah, a final comment from the back. Someone had their hand up. Yes, Heather.
She looks like she's bringing herself
Yeah, thank you. She's very intense. There's an intensity to her gaze, which is quite profound. All right, so tell me, what do you all think about the one on the right? So on the right, we have John Giuliani. If this style looks at all, if it's evoking anything in you, we have a replica here of an original by John Giuliani. It hangs down in front of the offices of the Transfiguration. If you've ever seen our image on the wall by the offices of the Transfiguration, that is Lakota. It is Christ, Elijah, and Moses, and they are all Lakota. John Giuliani is famous. He's also Roman Catholic, now deceased, for depicting the icons and the images of the lives of the saints in indigenous people's style. And he did them in Navajo, Lakota, a whole variety of different indigenous nations in North America. And then he also depicts a bunch in a variety of different peoples from South America as well. This was his passion. And so here we have a Madonna and Child, and they're Hopi. I wonder what you think. He made dozens. I dare even say hundreds. And you can go online and find them. And I had a hard time choosing one because they're stunning. What about it do you notice, though? Its beauty. Absolutely. Yes, Tish.
The hands, it's like...
Yes.
They're reaching together.
No, I was saying that, I was thinking that she isn't holding him.
Yeah.
She's giving.
Oh, wow.
She's letting go.
Uh-huh.
Say, here he is.
And even then, he still has his hands very close to hers.
Yeah.
Because he's not an infant like is often traditional, but he's not really old enough to sort of be ready to be given, right?
He's a little boy.
He's a little boy.
Yeah.
I see his hands and arms reaching out for an embrace, too.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of hard to tell, but it looks like he has
I
crosses
think it's
on
the
his
perfect gesture for a toddler, but also look how their hands make a spiral, make a sacred spiral.
Maybe, yeah, it does.
It does appear there are crosses on his clothing.
Uh-huh. Which, in traditional iconography, there would be subtle nods, even in the representations of a youthful Christ, of a child Christ. There would be subtle nods to his death. That's tradition. And so here we have this, just kind of in his what he's wearing, in his garb, is the nod.
That's also Calvert and Hopi tradition, the four sacred directions.
Interesting. Yeah.
I love the use of color. They are two distinct people, and yet the color, the red, the green, the white, pull them together. There's a unity between them that is stunning.
Yeah.
I love how regal she is.
She is the Queen of Heaven.
Yeah, she is.
I like the red. I see blue.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
He did this, and you'll see he did this a number of times. Hopi, Navajo, Lakota, I'm trying to remember others. And he would even do, this is one of his Hopi studies, and he had several in different palettes, and each one evokes something different because of the color.
Yeah. Well, traditionally, the blue is divinity.
Yeah.
And red is humanity.
So we have them put together.
Yeah.
You were saying, Jameson.
I was going to ask, hopefully you know, were all of his works American First Nations, or
Yes.
did he do other indigenous?
No, he did North and South America's indigenous peoples. Mhm. That was where he lived and worked. That was his passion. Okay, we need to move on because there's a lot of art to look at today. So let's keep going. Here's another Robert lens. And I'll let you just take a moment to read the statement. I have to say, and I'm going to jump in case you haven't finished it, I've looked at this. I had never read this before until this week when we were preparing. And I've looked at this icon a bunch of times. And I always assumed it was he's behind the barbed wire. That we have somehow put him or trapped him or imprisoned him. That this is Christ imprisoned. And then he says, it's up to you to decide if you're the one inside the fence and he's the one on the outside. And I thought, and he's peering in at me and my companion while I'm the one in prison, which has so much to do with, explorations of what it means to be in hell and for Christ to come and to draw you out. Indeed.
The Iota Sigma, Chi Sigma, is a decoration on lots of icons, but it means Jesus Christ, victor. And I wonder if the artist is not just decorating, but
Commenting. Indeed.
Yes. It's perfectly aligned, isn't it?
Suggestion of a cross behind him, which makes me think that he's inside the barbed wire.
Well, I think that's part of his halo.
But also the wood that is
It does,
upholding
that's true.
the
Yeah.
barbed wire.
Barbed wire, for those who have been to the Holy Land, is omnipresent in Israel and Palestine. You go past, through, near barbed wire all over the place. So contemporary experiences of the places Jesus walked are constantly being framed by barbed wire. And here he has put Jesus in the midst of it, which I think is quite profound. Okay. So now let's look at some icons by Kelly Lattimore, who will be our guest on Wednesday. And we wanted to put Kelly Lattimore in conversation with Robert Lenz and John Giuliani because they're accomplishing or they're pursuing similar things. They're taking the tradition of iconography and they're pulling the thread forward. And now what you have is the setting of traditional icons in contemporary scenes, or trying to evoke in you something different. So on the left, you have Christ in the rubble. This was made towards the outset of the siege of Gaza. So as Gaza was laid into ruin during the ongoing conflict there, he created this in dialogue with a contemporary Lutheran pastor and activist, Isaac Munther, Palestinian priest or Palestinian pastor in Bethlehem, who commissioned this. What thoughts do you have on this icon on the left, Christ in the rubble? Yes?
It looks like it is, I think, a nativity. It's the Holy Family together, and you have the star in the east up in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of a new interpretation instead of, being in front of a manger.
Mm-hmm.
And also remember that in the Nativity, they were forced to go to be counted by the Romans. They're, people under occupation. This is just two different occupations in the same place, separated by thousands of years, and yet Christ is still born into that occupied place.
And yet, without that knowledge of its origin, it looks like New York City.
Yeah.
To me.
Aside from the rubble.
No.
New York
After
City.
September 11th, it looks to me like the rubble.
Oh, I see.
I realize there are other buildings that are in the process of falling, And so that doesn't lend itself completely, but at first glance, it looks like they may be standing at ground zero.
Great. Others?
I know my geography there as well, but if the Holy Family fled Bethlehem to Egypt, would they not have gone through Gaza?
Absolutely. The road to Egypt would go directly through Gaza. Yeah.
The negative space around the Holy Family, it looks like, my childlike imaginings of the tomb, of Jesus' tomb.
Wonderful. I love it. Yes.
Whitney.
It reminds me, I think really strongly of this feeling parents can have of bringing a baby that represents so much hope into a world that feels just dark and scared and sad, and how to hold
Yeah.
both of those things and try to be okay with it.
So true. I mean, we talk sometimes about this, like keep Herod in Christmas. It's this idea that it's not a snow globe. It's not a serene, perfect picture. Christ is not. Madeline Engel writes some gorgeous poetry about this. It's not, Christ does not enter the world when the world was ready and right, when everything was at peace. Christ enters this. And most often our images of the infant Christ, it's like cradled by Mary in perfect bliss and serenity. We sing A Silent Night. And yet this is maybe a more helpful frame. Yeah, Barbara.
They're so vulnerable and they're so intent on their love for one another. It's really so beautiful to see that amidst all that destruction.
He may, when he's here on Wednesday, show us more. He sets the Holy Family as one of his themes that he has pulled through several times is the Holy Family as a homeless family. And he'll put them in a contemporary urban setting where it's clearly like, 20th or even 21st century is graffiti and all sorts of stuff in the background, and there's the Holy Family much like this. Amidst that, sort of trying to remind us of their vulnerability, of their lack of a home. We talk a lot about, Christ is born in where he can be born because the family didn't really have a place to go.
There's definitely a sense of no joy in God.
Yeah.
Even though it was a child, in fact, it may be even more affecting because there is no hope. Right?
Yeah. So let's look at the one on the right because we have a lot more art to look at. I love this icon, though he's not playing with the tradition in the same way. But I wonder what the one on the right, Christ in the wilderness, evokes for you. Please, yeah, Declan.
I see, like, before humans sort of fully polluted and destroyed the creation, there was still some beauty left that Jesus would get to see before he had to die.
Wow. Out. Before the degradation of creation, certainly before light pollution, like here's Jesus gazing upon and taking in the magnificence of the world before he dies.
Before we had to have dark sky parks.
Yeah, before we had to designate places to be dark sky. Yeah, Justin.
His face looks like that of worry, and honestly, I identify a lot with this because, his time in the wilderness is prior to, his final journey, essentially.
Yeah.
It's him, I think, wondering a lot as to what is to come.
So true. Yes, please.
I think it's extremely identifiable for us because I think all of us have had moments where we've felt desperate like that and looked to the heavens.
The gazing up at the heavens in desperation.
Yeah.
And the proportion of the fire to the size of his body, that's just the littlest little fire, right? Next to him.
It's creeping in.
And exactly. But the light is shining in the darkness,
Yeah, exactly.
nonetheless.
And he chose to keep the traditional letters in the halo ho-on, which means the one who is. And so this is the one who is gazing up into the cosmos. This is the cosmic Christ brought down. It's such humility. Like you talk about Christ humbling himself. This is to me showing Christ humbling himself, the one who is.
The icon is portraying the most human moment in his life. This is when he was tempted and
Yeah, he's about to be tempted. Yeah. Final thought, please.
I may be wrong, but it would also make the link between Moses and the burning bush because of what's said on the halo, that he is the I am, and he's looking and drawing attention from the sky.
I love it.
I like that, yeah.
And he's earthly, and yet he's also the infinite.
Such a great point. Perhaps this is an evocation of the burning bush. Moses in the wilderness encountering God. In the burning bush, here's Jesus, and the name given in the halo is evocative of the name God gives Moses when Moses asks, "What's your name?" from the burning bush. I think it's a great point. All right, you can ask Kelly Lattimore about these on Wednesday when he's here, okay?
So at the end of class last week, we had a request for some Ethiopian iconography, and so I'm including this, which is not made in Ethiopia, but it's done sort of in that style. A few years ago, the School of Theology at Sewanee decided that it wanted to change the cross that was in its chapel, which had it was a very traditional cross with a wooden carved corpus on it that was not Nordic, but not Middle Eastern either. And so they decided, along with Sewanee's, deep looking at its history of racism and its place in the South, the School of Theology decided it wanted to do something radically different. And so they replaced the crucifix in the chapel with this one. Here's a picture of the artist standing before it. Her name is Laura James. Along with the Christ in the Rubble, these are the two newest pieces of art that we're showing. It's done in this Ethiopian style, which has bold colors, not a broad color palette, but also like chunks of color. There's not a lot of shading. The traditions around Ethiopian Orthodox iconography are very strict. It's very colorful, but not a variety of colors. But it's also, I'm just trying to plow through this quickly. It's not, in the Ethiopian tradition, you wouldn't see necessarily a crucifix like this. You would see a square rectangle with the icon painted on it. But the School of Theology was looking for something to go in the place of a large crucifix. And so they did this, where it's cut out in the shape of a cross instead of a big, rectangular icon. And I just wanted to put it up, again, I'm flying through this, wanted to put up against another piece of art that we've seen in this class because it owes as much to that as it does to the Ethiopian tradition, and it's this one.
Oh, yeah.
Y'all remember the San Damiano cross from Assisi? I wonder, what about these two crucifixes? I'm sorry, we couldn't find there's not a lot of pictures of the crucifix in Sewanee. So we've got this photo, but I wonder what you see that they might have in common.
Liz, could you say again?
Gracefulness of his arms.
Yes?
Yeah.
It's graceful.
Yeah.
He's not hanging on the cross, is he? How would you describe his posture?
Almost reclined.
Almost praying.
Standing. Mm-hmm. He is standing on the cross. This is more of a victorious Jesus, isn't it, than a suffering one.
Can I say something that I think that is going to add on to what you're saying? I think both of them are evocative of the fact that we are making the cross more ornate, beautiful, and symbolic as opposed to an instrument of.
Yes.
Right.
It's beautiful.
They're both beautiful.
I mean, Laura James's art is beautiful. The San Damiano cross in that era was an attempt like Cimabue and those late medieval and early Renaissance. The cross we were not trying to show historical crucifixion. We were taking and claiming the beauty of salvation and applying that artistically. David.
Both of them have the hands turned upward. Very different from what happens.
So true. Almost like in Aaron's position, the priest's position at the altar, praying.
not, I mean, it's at you.
Yeah.
The artist was actually a little upset that they put it on a pedestal. It needed to be raised because it sits in a chapel and it needed to be a little higher, but she liked it on the ground because she could go and give it a hug. Which you would not do with the cross that replaced.
So let's click forward again to just keep us moving. Last week we ended up our discussion by reflecting on the head of Christ. You remember that beautiful picture of our blonde-haired, light-eyed Jesus. And so I wanted to show you this image, which was created by a group of British scientists and anthropologists, Israeli anthropologists, and published initially in Popular Mechanics in 2002. And they found ancient skulls in the Middle East, in the Holy Land.
In Jerusalem.
In Jerusalem. And put them through CGI and used that to build a three-dimensional model of what Jesus' head might have actually been like, the skull. Then they used additional forensic anthropology to bring skin and flesh and eyes. This image comes out in 2002 and offers a counterpoint if you want to
You
scroll.
want to go to the next one?
Go ahead forward and click once. There you go. It offers a counterpoint in discussion. So I want to ask, how did you feel the first time that the real face of Jesus is shown on the screen?
I actually love it because it puts with what my father, who was a military chaplain, always told me that there was nothing about Jesus that would attract you to him because he was so good looking.
Mm-hmm.
He was so very ordinary. There was nothing, oh God, let's go see him.
Mm-hmm.
Justin.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he just looks like a Palestinian dude, basically. But I
Yep.
think it's funny in reflection, of course, of the Jesus on the right, that obviously, Western Christianity from Western Europe and North America and such, if you've been to any sort of ethnic church also, there's always going to be an iconography of Jesus, usually, of Jesus reflected in the ethnicity of the church. So it's very much so that you get the same exact thing with the right side of Christ from Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I think, because of the hegemony of the culture within Christianity, you don't really notice it until it's very obviously pointed out that everyone does exactly the same thing, essentially, with Jesus.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to have an image like this hanging in your prayer space as a focus of devotion. And I think it might change the way we pray, our thinking.
That's
I
interesting.
think it would deepen our faith in some ways. I think it would challenge our faith in some ways, right? But I mean, head of Christ was in every home and on all sorts of things. If we could go back in time and replace it, what would that have done historically?
I think it would challenge our world also, very much. As we look out into the world,
Yeah.
the image on the right is so ingrained in us, and yet the image on the left is the world, but I don't know that we see the world.
Yeah. Sarah.
I think the timing of the image on the left is auspicious. It's 2002, which is right after, September 11th and the subsequent invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
So at a time when popular culture is villainizing people of Middle Eastern descent, somebody has gone to a lot of trouble to point out that this is probably what Jesus really looked like.
You can imagine the reception.
Yes.
But this has just recently been republished, and so you could just Google Popular Mechanics.
You can read the whole piece unless you do a lot of reading of Popular Mechanics without a subscription. You should be able to access a free read of this article. Yeah. And it's fascinating to read the science behind the creation of this. How many skulls were exhumed and used? What they did scientifically to sort of diagram or map them, how they made decisions about the fleshiness of a face, how they made decisions about haircut and beard type, how sunburnt the person or how dark-skinned the person would be. Lots of thoughtfulness went into this, but of course it's all, I mean, I love that it's the real face of Jesus. I mean, it's an effort at historicity. And of course, for those of us who have been around here for a little while, there was the movement, the historical Jesus movement in the 20th century, trying to figure out what parts of the scriptures, really happened, and how much of this is layered accretions of the tradition, projections onto Jesus, and this effort by scholars to peel away the bits that aren't real. And here, this is a kind of visual culmination of this wider movement within scholarship. But at the end of the day, it's hard to know. This is another tool. I love how Rebecca puts it, to pray with this, not just to kind of admire it or wonder about it, but to use it devotionally could be really fascinating.
I hope it's a little bit provocative, and we're going to move forward.
We gotta
because
move.
we got a lot of images to go on.
And we have 8 minutes left.
We're going to keep provoking you.
So
Here we go.
in a full circle moment, we're coming back to that awful test that I had to take. So I showed you, this was the final image on my list of art pieces that I could choose when I took that test. And this is a piece of art called Christa, and it's by Edwina Sands. It was first made, she molded it out of clay in 1974. And a few iterations later, one is a sort of bronze resin version, and then she had a full bronze cast of it made. In bronze, this piece weighs 250 pounds, and it's about 4 feet tall. And she moved, this is actually, Edwina Sands is the granddaughter of Winston Churchill, interestingly. But she moved to New York and befriended the dean of the cathedral there, and then offered it to him, said, would you like this piece? It was hanging in her home. Offered it to the cathedral, and the dean said yes, and probably did a little bit of preparation, but not enough. The suffragan bishop of New York called it theologically and historically indefensible. This was put up and then pulled down almost immediately because of the
firestorm.
Yes, and again, this was 40 years ago-ish, whatever. Math is not hard.
41.
Easy. So we've come a long way. We're a different church now, but yes, I wonder what your thoughts are about.
Julian and Norwich actually wrote about Christ as mother in the 1300s.
Yep.
Absolutely.
To read what she has to say about the nurturing Christ
Mm-hmm.
and Christ as our mother, and it's something I hadn't thought about before. And so that idea of the feminine in Christ isn't new, it's not discussed.
Describing Christ using female characteristics is part of the tradition and has been for centuries, and yet this caused a scandal. Yeah, Bradley.
Do we know, did the Romans crucify women?
I don't know the answer to that.
I believe they did.
I don't know.
We'll have to look into that, Bradley.
Yeah, yes.
I originally belonged to an Episcopal church up in Beloit, Wisconsin, and there's a college in Beloit that really kind of, art history is one of the major things. And in our church up there, we have hanging a very similar
Interesting.
sculpture.
Wow.
But it's hanging and it's looking out at the people.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Feet in the back, and it's almost like it's mine. It's a beautiful symbol.
Wow.
Yeah. Love it.
So for a 20th century, when I answered this question, I pointed out that this was first molded out of clay right around the time of the Philadelphia Leaven. The church was grappling with the idea of women's ordination and what it means to see a woman stand in persona Christi, in the person of Christ, in the celebration of the Eucharist. And this just feels like it's part of, it's not this led to this, but it's all part of the soup at that time. And I just think that that's really interesting. Justin?
So I have a question. Knowing that this was made and the firestorm was in like the mid to late 80s on this one, is there different periods of time or I guess different cultures within Christianity that you feel like a piece of art like this would have been more accepted, I guess, other than our obvious contemporary period?
I don't know.
I think 1980s New York is a pretty receptive place. And maybe if the dean had just prepped the community a little bit more, it could have been better received. But if it feels unprepared, then,
I mean, maybe a way to answer it is to say, and then let's move forward, that it was restored to the cathedral and is hanging there and has been since 2016.
Hangs there now.
And so perhaps we're in a better place now to see and receive something like this.
It also is a message to priests, if you're going to do something controversial, tell the bishop beforehand.
Yes.
The reason I asked that question is because I think Teddy made the comment that people have put feminine features on Christ through all of Christian history.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder if maybe at other periods of time that something like this would
Isn't it interesting?
And it's different to describe Christ as a mother and to describe Christ as a naked woman on a cross. Like, this is, I think, intended to be provocative. And Edwina says she just sat down. What am I going to make today? I'm going to make a female Jesus. That's really her process. She just sort of made it up one day. But we wanted to, if we've got,
skip the next one. Skip it.
That was in Mexico. Here, we're just going to fly through a couple of other images because we have a minute. This is homeless Jesus. This is a sculpture that's designed to look like, a homeless person sleeping on a park bench. Notice this bench doesn't have those little arms in the middle that keeps you away. Yeah, we've got hold of you. It's not in.
We gotta go,
It's
y'all.
in 15 minutes.
Okay.
But the only
We're
it's
good.
hard to see. The only thing that says that it might be Jesus is look at his feet.
Yeah,
You see the okay.
I'm trying.
You're almost there.
It's going behind that.
Oh,
so I
darn
don't
it.
think you're going to get it.
All right.
So, did you want to?
Yeah, we read The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And here's a piece of 20th century, beautiful piece of 20th century art, The Mourners. And we have essentially the composition of the deposition of Christ being deposed from the cross, which is a traditional image painted through the medieval and Renaissance period. Christ being lowered down from the cross, and you have it being layered on top of an American scene of the body of someone being removed from their lynching in a tree.
Do we have enough time to contextualize the next one?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we do.
go quick.
Okay.
This
This is maybe one of the hardest things that I think I've seen, not in person, but this is a Brazilian piece of art that tortured Christ. And I think that, the artist who wrote this, or that created it, wanted people to see that, the crucifixion was not a beautiful thing. The pain that Jesus actually went through in being crucified, I think it comes through in this pretty good. Notice his wiry dark hair. This feels like the body of someone native to Brazil to me, and I think that a place of incredible income inequality, of destruction of native lands and habitats, so the artist created this, which we've seen this image as well. Christ with arms sort of wrenched back and twisted, and another.
And still, it doesn't look anywhere near as tortured,
Right.
No. No.
It still is not just beautiful, but Jesus doesn't look to be in a significant amount of pain
Right.
on the writing.
Well, if you saw, that's maybe not a good reproduction then, because he is a tortured body. The Grunwald, as Father Roper has pointed out before, was intentionally created as an act of solidarity with those who had suffered primarily from the plague and other diseases that were just ravaging Europe. And here we have, a quarter, half of the population suffering and dying, and the painting, the altarpiece is designed to sort of express solidarity with that.
So you've seen some difficult things, and here's something not difficult. Yes. This is the second Sunday school reference to the movie Dogma, which I think is just fun. Sometimes you just need a different Jesus. And another Christ being taken down from the cross. This one from the Brick Testament.
Which is really an extraordinary thing.
it's
They
remarkable,
depict most of the Bible using Legos. And you can find it is all public access, public domain online. And the artist has taken great efforts to try to depict the scenes using Legos thoughtfully.
The Brick Bible Testament is available in the bookstore, should you be interested.
That is our time. Thank you so much for your good attention and
Come
for
on
your
Wednesday.
participation.
Come on Wednesday.
Come Wednesday night.